Why must every single mom on these shows make their entire personality? I'm a mom.
Never heard her talk about her daughter once, honestly.
Where's the dad?
Do you like dating reality TV shows? No? Well, neither do I. But we watched a horror film based on one, and this is directed and co-written by Tim Cruise. Yes, this is a horror film which takes place in a sort of Bachelor, Love Island style kind of dating reality TV show, but actually elements of a slasher film in there as well. Now, to give you some idea, I was a little bit apprehensive about having to watch this movie because the thought of watching dating reality TV is about as appealing as having my eyeballs removed, and I would rather literally sit in a sensory deprivation tank than having to watch an hour of a reality dating TV show. So I was a little bit kind of like, oh, do I really want to watch this? But I've got to say, if that's how you feel about reality TV dating shows, this movie may still appeal to you because it's actually a clever film in the fact that I think it appeals to fans of those shows, but also people who hate them because it definitely kind of deconstructs and lampoons those shows. Anyway, let's talk about the plot. So it focuses on this young single mother who is struggling in her love life, primarily down to the fact that she has a young child. But her brother enters her into this kind of this latest season of this kind of reality TV show, which is a little bit like, I think, probably The Bachelor if you're in the States, and Love Island if you're in the UK, and you get the gist. And she kind of gets accepted and taken to this kind of luxury island where she competes against a variety of other women to get the affections of this bachelor, who is this suave, good-looking, cut, wealthy kind of guy who, but on the surface of it, seems like every woman's dream. However, there seems to be a little wrinkle in this season, as there is also a slasher on the island who is cutting a swathe through the contestants and crew alike. Now, what will happen? You have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's talk about what I think worked with this movie. So as I've said, if you're a little bit apprehensive about watching a movie which is kind of set in a reality dating TV show, I think this movie does a good job here of appealing to fans of that, but also fans, or people who don't like it, non-fans. Because it definitely is shining a light on some of the hypocrisy, some of the kind of like the fakeness of how it's all kind of constructed, and the reality of how these things are kind of made. And certainly it doesn't kind of seem like as glam, or as kind of like as as real as it might appeal to those people who kind of watch this stuff and consume it and think it's real and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of a fun movie in a way, in the fact that it's kind of, it's somewhat kind of taking the piss, somewhat kind of lampooning these kind of like these reality shows, the people that go in them and the people that make them, cutthroat Hollywood types, the whole fakeness of these and the personas that these sort of people on screen are putting on, but their real kind of like motivations and real kind of personalities are significantly different. But I think still it has that sort of glam and glitz of these shows that people who do like it will still maybe enjoy. So I've got to say, I think this movie does actually a reasonable job here of balancing the two sides to have maybe a movie that might appeal to both camps, as long as you don't mind a low budget kind of slasher movie along the way. And I have to give credit where credit is due as well. Having this movie take place in such a kind of setting seems somewhat original to me. We've seen kind of like slashers in paradise, but having this kind of like this reality TV show, this dating show, and it does focus quite a lot on that. But then you add the element of a masked serial killer. Gotta say, I felt it made its mark. It was somewhat memorable in at least its idea. What else can I say? I think the movie does seem quite glam. It does. I think the danger of a movie like this is you can have a setup like that, and then it kind of just forgets it and kind of just goes on to a by-the-numbers slasher film. And to be honest, there are elements of that. But the movie still maintains that kind of level of glam and glitz throughout the movie. You know, we see various kind of challenges that these women have to kind of go through, but we also see kind of behind the scenes of that, and the kind of the cutthroat producers and directors and what they think, and the reality of the kind of for example, the Bachelor, who is really just there because, you know, he just wants the kind of the money, or wants to get kind of laid and all that kind of stuff. And you know, but it still has that sort of that level of glam that I think you associate with kind of TV shows like that. So that was kind of quite good. I thought the characters were somewhat memorable. I quite like the fact our main kind of girl kind of gets kind of quite friendly with one of these other contestants, and I kind of quite like the fact that, you know, we have that friendly kind of relationship with one. And I also have to say, what it doesn't include, without kind of spoiling anything, there are elements here where I thought it was going to be somewhat predictable, for it, you know, where, you know, certainly with the kind of the romantic side of things, where it doesn't end up going, which I thought was good. In regards to kind of the horror side of stuff, the killer has an interesting kind of aesthetic that kind of, I would say, feeds into the more kind of glamorous side of this movie. And also there's a relatively high body count. Admittedly, that's mainly in the kind of the final 10-15 minutes or so, but yeah, ends up having quite a high kind of body count. So what doesn't work for me? So outside of a couple of exceptions, I do think the story here is somewhat kind of like by the numbers. It pretty much kind of goes the way that you think it's going to go. You know, not too many surprises. Characters end up being more or less who you think they're going to be. There's no real kind of like, oh my god, my expectations were completely kind of like wrong with this character. No, it pretty much kind of plays out like you think it's going to, both in the way the characters are and the kind of like the story elements within that. I have to say, our main character. Now, if the movie, I would say, I think thinks she comes across differently to at least how I sort of saw her. So the movie, I think, positions her to be this kind of strong, working mother who, you know, is a seeker of the truth and doesn't take any kind of BS and all this type of stuff. And although I can see that's what they kind of were going for, I have to say, I thought she seemed quite like a person who complains a lot. I get the fake nature of this kind of show, and that it's within this movie, if you like. But to me, I think the movie thinks our main character, you know, is this kind of likeable, downtrodden kind of single mother who's sort of standing up for what she believes in. And that might be true to a degree, but it also comes across as like she just whinges and moans and complains through the entire movie, and it's never really kind of like game for it or kind of going in with kind of both feet. She always just seems to be like somewhat of a negative character, but I don't think the movie realises that's how it comes across. In their mind, she comes across as this kind of like this strong character, etc., etc. But I have to say, to me, she seemed like a little bit of a wet flannel, if I'm honest. A little bit of kind of a negative Nelly, shall we say. I think the acting was okay, the acting was all fine, and I quite like some of the kind of the cheesiness that is portrayed by some of the kind of the actors, but I think some people may kind of say the acting isn't particularly good because some of the characters are a little bit over the top and a little bit kind of like campy, so bear that in mind. You can see that it's done on purpose, but I wouldn't be surprised if people kind of pick up on some of the kind of the acting choices and say, oh, the acting was rubbish, when they were, I think, more deliberate choices. So just bear that in mind. The horror elements here, I think they maybe could have just turned the dial up a little bit with this one. There's not a huge amount of kind of gore. Some of the kills are kind of off screen. In fact, quite a lot. The killer doesn't really come across as particularly kind of menacing. There's one or two shots where I kind of quite liked what they did in regard to the making the killer seem threatening, but for the most part, it feels very much like a kind of a daytime lifestyle sort of style movie where the movie doesn't want to be particularly gratuitous, doesn't want to be kind of particularly kind of violent, and is certainly avoiding kind of showing scenes like that. So if you want certainly a scary horror movie, this is not going to be the one. It's more it more is kind of like a daytime salacious kind of movie with an added element of kind of a slasher, but never really goes for a full-on kind of horror. And you know, we got the CGI, but there's a couple of kind of like mild kind of gore scenes, but it's really kind of fairly kind of safe to a large degree, and it never really feels particularly kind of like violent at any one point. And neither is it kind of if you're expecting lots of nakedness. No, obviously that's not in there as well. I was asked recently if I think the erotic thriller kind of genre would come back, and I suppose this movie does have one toe in that, but it's really, I wouldn't certainly call this titillation really, to be honest. It's very, very light in both gore and kind of like sexual kind of stuff as well. The killer, when the killer is revealed, I don't know if it was kind of, it was a little bit more of a whimper than a bang, to be honest. The motivations were kind of a little bit kind of like, it seemed a little bit desperate, and a little bit ill thought through. Overall, you know, it spends a lot of time on the kind of the actual kind of deconstructing of this reality TV show more than the kind of the horror elements. It's more of a, I could say, like a jokey kind of like jab at these kind of reality TV shows, which I did find fun, but the horror elements feel somewhat more of an afterthought. And you know, again, I don't think some of the story elements where that was weaved in were particularly strong either. It ends up being somewhat kind of like, you know, obvious. Our kind of character seems to make kind of like huge leaps in logic about what's kind of going on. Our main character about, you know, oh my god, something's amiss here. Like, why would you know, she finds like a tiara on the beach and thinks, oh my god, something suspicious is going on. Why would you think that? You know, it's just a tiara on the beach. Anyway, overall, I kind of like the idea. I think I enjoyed this movie more than I thought I was going to. I quite like the kind of the deconstruction and the lampooning and the parodying of these kind of reality TV shows, and I think it does obviously highlight how fake those kind of things are. But I do think maybe fans of that will still enjoy it, because it does have scenes that kind of are, you know, still kind of go through the motions and that. And, you know, some of the characters are a little bit over the top. But, you know, it's still a reasonable kind of movie. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. You know, I wasn't bored tonight. I quite enjoyed it. I mean, it does slow maybe down in the kind of in Act 2, but you know, for the most part, I think it's a watchable kind of horror film. I don't think it really kind of stands out, but it's an interesting idea. I do feel it had some degrees of originality to it, but at the same time plays it pretty safe. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.